Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone. We've got kids joining us from across the continent today, so welcome in, whether you're in Texas, California, Ontario, I'm in Newfoundland. We are truly coast to coast. It's a wild ride, and a big thank you to all of you for joining us as we continue to showcase and celebrate just the coolest people and places on planet Earth. Now, you're joining us as we are continuing an epic series today with the amazing folks at World Wildlife Fund. Now, last year, we partnered with Kristy, who's back today for an amazing series as part of our Wild Hope series. She really does it all. And what she does best is conserve one of the coolest animals on planet Earth. Now, we're going to get into that in just a second, but I do want to highlight for our friends joining us, we do have a Kahoot today. So if you want to play along with a little 4-question quiz between our talk and our Q&A, you can pull up that game pin and do just that. Now, when I used to volunteer at the Toronto Zoo, there was this amazing opportunity to go down to the U.S. to bring back the black-footed ferret. It's an iconic predator in an iconic ecosystem in the central part of the United States, and it is one of the coolest conservation stories in the world, and it's right in our backyard here in North America. So Kristy is the lead on making sure that we bring back this charismatic critter to the wild, and without further ado, I'm going to bring her in to explain a little bit about the amazing work that she does to do just that. So thank you so much, Kristy, for joining us again, and welcome back to the broadcast.
Thank you so much for having me. I am thrilled to be here with all of you today.
It is so exciting to have such a wide array of kids. I was saying to you just before we got underway, truly, it's Texas, New Jersey, Colorado, Ontario, and beyond. So I'm going to zip my lip and stop talking and leave you to take us away. Your presentation looks great. Let's dive in and do this thing.
So great. Well, welcome and hi from Montana. And today I'm going to chat with you about the story of the masked bandit of the prairie, the black-footed ferret, how they almost went extinct and what we are doing to save them. I hope some of you have heard about ferrets, and if you haven't, you'll know a lot more by the time we're done today. So, once found throughout North America from Canada to Mexico, black-footed ferrets are the most endangered mammal in North America. And they are the only ferret species native to the continent. They are a member of the weasel family or the mustelid family, and they're like slinky-sized little predators of the prairie who stay awake all night long, meaning they are nocturnal. They specialize on a diet of prairie dogs. So most of their meals come from eating prairie dogs. They rely on the burrows that prairie dogs create for shelter and raising their young. And historically, as we talked about a little bit before, they range from Canada to Mexico, but they also overlapped wherever prairie dogs were found. And in particular, they overlapped with 3 prairie dog species: black-tailed prairie dogs, which is the majority of their range, whitetails, and gunnisons. And historians feel that over 100 years ago, there were probably almost 500,000 ferrets in the wild. However, with European settlement into North America in the 1800s, the landscape really shifted from this wild Serengeti to a landscape of agriculture. So native grasses were plowed to create crops like corn, soy, and wheat to grow for humans. But also prairie dogs were poisoned in many, many ways in many, many places. And that led to the demise of their distribution and abundance. And finally, humans accidentally introduced a non-native disease called plague. And that is lethal to prairie dogs and ferrets. So these 3 causes combined led to 95% reduction in where prairie dogs lived. And because ferrets are tied to the health of prairie dogs, their population also declined dramatically. So much so that we twice thought that black-footed ferrets were extinct. And they were listed on the Endangered Species Act. But then in 1981, a ranch dog named Shep down here in the right-hand corner, he saved the day because in 1981, he found the last remaining population of ferrets in his backyard in Wyoming. And his dad found this ferret that Shep brought in, and that led to this discovery of the last remaining population, which was amazing because we didn't know anything about ferrets. We thought they were extinct, and now we had a second chance at saving the species from extinction. So the biologists that you see here, they trapped and they studied and they tried to learn as much as they could about black-footed ferrets. They even took samples and froze them just in case we may need them in the future. And this was amazing because what happened was by mid-1980s, plague, that disease I was talking about earlier, actually came through and started to kill prairie dogs and ferrets in this last remaining population. So biologists scrambled to live trap the remaining population of ferrets in this area. They brought 24 in to captivity. 18 of those survived, and only 7 of those contributed to all ferrets found in the wild in captivity today. But thanks to those captive breeding efforts, we were able to save the species from extinction. So there was about 7 years maybe where there were no ferrets in the wild, but there were these adorable little ferret kits and their moms and their dads in captivity. And we were able to successfully train these kits, we call ferret babies, to learn how to kill prairie dogs in a captive setting with their moms so that they could learn how to be reintroduced back into the wild. So we like to call this one the boot camp program for ferrets. And finally, in 1991, we were able to bring ferrets back into the wild after their absence. So since then, there's been about 34 places where ferrets have been put out. About half of those are active today because there's still a lot of things that are challenging ferret survival. And we will go into that a little bit later. So today, there are only about 370 ferrets in the wild and about another 300 in captivity. So remember, we said that we thought there may be 500,000 ferrets. This is a long way down from that number. And in order to recover ferrets from the black-footed ferret, or the federal list of threatened and endangered species, we need 3,000 in the wild. And these populations need to be spread in 30 or more places. And we need to have at least 30 or more moms and dads out there to be able to reach these recovery goals. So how do we get there? Some of the challenges that exist today remain the presence of plague. It's not something that ferrets or prairie dogs evolved with, so they have no natural immunity to it, kind of like we didn't have any natural immunity to flu or COVID. And so we have to protect them from plague. I'll talk about that in a little bit. We also need a lot more space for ferrets than we have now, and we need to be able to follow them around. Secondly, we need to make sure that there's room for people raising livestock and prairie dogs at the same time, and that communities are engaged in recovery efforts. And we also need to make sure that there's enough money out there so that biologists at each site can follow ferrets around and provide life-saving vaccinations to them and their prairie dog prey. So in order to get to this recovery, we need to monitor their populations. We need to make sure that we can find these guys at night. I'll talk about that in a little bit. We need to protect them from plague, and we need to make sure genetic diversity is enhanced because there were only 7 founders. So step 1 is we have to protect these little McNuggets of the prairie from plague. And we do that by spreading a dust down into prairie dog burrows because plague is transferred by fleas. So fleas carry the plague bacterium in their guts. And then when they land on a prairie dog, they take a blood meal and infect prairie dogs with it. So this dust actually reduces flea populations. We can also use what's called a grain. You can see this red grain on top of this prairie dog burrow here. And when a prairie dog eats this grain, it protects them from plague when a flea lands on them. And finally, we can also distribute protecting baits to prairie dogs. These are peanut butter flavored edible baits that we can deliver to prairie dogs by drone or all-terrain vehicle so that we can protect the many, many thousands of acres of prairie dogs needed to protect ferrets. And so once those baits are distributed, these little prairie dogs, they love peanut butter. And so they will come out and they'll eat one of these blue baits that you see down here on the left side of your screen. And they are protected from plague for up to a year. So we have to do this every year. But once we protect prairie dogs from plague, we also need to make sure we do the same for ferrets. And because they're at nocturnal, we need to go and look for them at night using spotlights attached to roofs of trucks to look for their notorious green eye shine. See this really cool eye shine here? And this is a great picture. You can see why we call them the masked bandits of the prairie. They've got this black mask on their face. So this green eye shine helps us determine whether it's a ferret or a badger or something else. And you can imagine if you are looking at night into these little prairie dog burrows scattered all over here for just those little green eye shines, how tough that is. It's like finding a needle in a haystack. So we've developed some really cool technology to use thermal cameras attached to a tower, as you see here, or by drone with a thermal camera. I'm going to play a video here. You can see this white dot. It follows the ferrets around. Thermal cameras detect the huge heat signature of an animal. Instead of just looking for eye shine, we can see the whole body of a ferret using thermal cameras. And so you can see this orange. These are the heat coming out of prairie dog burrow openings. And we are able to track ferrets using this very, very, very cool technology. So once we find a black-footed ferret, then what do? Well, we need to track them to the prairie dog burrow that they are in. We place a live trap down into the burrow, and this is a long tubular live trap that acts like the extension of the burrow. We take a GPS location so we know where it is. This orange box has a ring reader attached to it. So if a ferret is microchipped, then we can tell who it is. If it's not microchipped, we know that's a new kit born into the wild that we need to vaccinate and protect. And then these reflectors here help us find the burrow more readily. So once we have a ferret in a trap, like I said, we're double checking to see if we know who this ferret is already. And if we do or don't, we still take it to the hospital trailer where we can provide life-saving vaccinations. So ferrets have one vaccine. So an initial dose with a booster is good for the ferret's lifetime. And once they wake up, we put them back into the burrow in which they were found. And we do this a whole bunch of times. I'm going to play a little video showing you what this looks like.
Most endangered mammals in North America. And there are only about 390 in the wild today. Black-footed ferrets are not only biologically important, but culturally important to the tribes of Fort Belknap. And bringing this animal back is like bringing a relative home for them. It's an incredible honor to be working with the tribes of Fort Belknap to return this endangered species to the prairie. It's very special because it hosts one of 14 ferret populations in North America, and it is the first Native Nation-led ferret population. So here, this animal relative holds high significance to them.
When I was out here firsthand kind of experiencing it, just realizing how delicate they are and how dependent they are on us and organizations like this, and thinking, bringing back the vitality of my land and my tribal land and my tribal animals that we have here. It felt really close to my heart, and it's really rewarding for me.
The primary threat to the black-footed ferret is a non-native disease called sylvatic plague. And in order for us to establish and maintain populations of this endangered species, it's important for us to vaccinate them against this deadly disease. We live trap them from their burrows. We transport them to a portable hospital trailer where we vaccinate them against this deadly disease. And then we return them to the wild. We must look for them at night because they are nocturnal species. We do that by setting roof-mounted spotlights on our trucks. And while spotlighting is effective, we need to rely on line of sight to see that ferret. And we also need that ferret to be looking directly at us for us to pick up its eye shine. In search of solutions, we are also testing thermal cameras mounted to towers and drones to help detect the heat signature of the ferret. We're really hoping this tool can be used to help crews on the ground narrow the areas to focus. So instead of having to look through 100,000 acres, maybe they only need to look at 20,000 acres or 2,000 acres. And we're thinking that FLIR cameras can help us better improve technology at those sites and streamline the crew's ability to find ferrets, live trap them, and protect them. And what's exciting is that the ferrets that we're trapping are looking very healthy. So we've got good reproduction into the system this year, and the recovery goals for this species call for 3,000 in the wild. So while the road is long, we are hopeful.
Great. Well, and that was a little snapshot of a night in the life of a black-footed ferret on a really cool site in northern Montana. And it speaks to the journey of black-footed ferret recovery as one of innovation. And I spoke earlier about how we had to learn how to raise them in captivity. We had to team up as partners to get good at finding them and protecting them. We had to teach captive ferrets how to hunt prairie dogs before they got released. We learned how to do some reintroduction efforts. We learned to improve our ability to protect them and prairie dogs from plague. And we also learned how to increase our detection of ferrets in the wild using thermal cameras. And one of the latest and coolest innovations is how we can improve the genetic diversity of those 7 black-footed founders. So you may remember when I talked about earlier that there were some biologists that were very forward thinking, and they collected samples from some of the ferrets that they caught back in the early 1980s. And those samples were frozen at the San Diego Frozen Zoo. And fast forward into the early 2000s, and we have been able to clone a black-footed ferret using those frozen cells from a ferret named Willa, who died in 1988. So that was a long time ago, probably before some of you were born. But we were able to, through genetic technology, clone this ferret and produce offspring from it. And so the first ferret that was cloned, her name was is Elizabeth Ann. And since then, Noreen and Antonia have also been cloned. And the purpose of cloning is to increase that genetic diversity. So Willa's genetic diversity and her genes bring almost 10 times more genetic diversity into the current population than what currently exists. So this technology has really allowed us to advance science in a way that can ensure that ferrets have the robustness and the genetic health to withstand future events related to plague or population declines caused from climate. So what's really, 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 really exciting, science is so cool as our ferrets. So Antonia, one of the ferrets that was cloned last year, this spring gave birth to 3 ferret babies. 1 unfortunately died, but 2 have survived. And this is history in the making. No one has ever cloned and had reproduced a U.S. endangered species before. And so this is not only groundbreaking, but it's super exciting and really gives black-footed ferret recovery a great chance at surviving and reaching that mark. And so as we had chatted about earlier, innovation really matters. All of these techniques that we've covered today have played a huge role in enabling us to bring the number of ferrets forward. And even though the road is long, it's important. And why? Why should we recover black-footed ferrets? Well, we talked about it a little bit in the video, but black-footed ferrets are native to North America. They were born here. They are inherently valuable because they are a species of our country. And in particular, they are a species only native here, the only ferret species. So some of the domestic ferrets that your friends may have, they are Siberian polecats or European polecats. But black-footed ferrets are the only ones that live here in North America. Secondly, as a medium-sized carnivore or predator in the food web, ferrets play a really key role in keeping populations of prairie dogs in check, which has a whole bunch of cascading impacts within the food web. And all of that works together to keep this grassland paradise in place. And finally, many tribes, many Native American tribes in the Great Plains hold black-footed ferrets in great significance. They honor them by wearing ferret pelts on their regalia, and some are even buried with those pelts upon their passing. So we do have a long way to go to get to recovery, but what gives me hope is you, the next generation of scientists, of biologists, of ferret protectors that are here. They're going to carry on the legacy of partnership and innovation to ensure that this mass bandit of the prairie stays here for many, many, many years to come. And here are a few ways that you can help us do that. We're going to start with a ferret acronym. So ferret, F, find a zoo, a museum, or a nature center that has ferrets or prairie dogs exhibits and go see it. Educate yourself on black-footed ferret ecology. I will share a website here in a little bit that you can learn from. You can look at other websites to see what else you can learn and how you can share what you're learning with your friends. And reach out to everybody you know to talk about how cool ferrets are and how they need our help. And then finally, you can go to a place where there's prairie dog habitat, and you can even volunteer to help look for ferrets at some of these sites. So if you would like some more information, you can visit blackfootedferret.org or even our website, worldwildlife.org. And you are always, always welcome to reach out to me at my email listed here.
Oh, Kristy, that was so much fun. Oh, you got a video. Sorry.
Nope, and that's good. I'm going to play this while we're asking questions, if that's okay with everybody.
Amazing. What we're going to do in a minute is dive in with our Kahoot. So please do play this, and you can talk to us a little about it as I bring up just our Kahoot info so our classes can get that ready if you want to play along with our little 4-question quiz between the talk and Q&A. And then we're going to do our big Q&A with all our classes, Mr. Hancock, Mr. S, all our groups on YouTube. What a cool thermal imagery. So again, it's like your presentation blends cutting edge tech with you calling them Slinkies and McNuggets, which is really delightful. So thank you for that. And I also want to say on the cloning note, I saw this on the news the other day, and what made me laugh my head off was that they highlighted ferrets cloned to give birth, and they were overlaying it with videos from Jurassic Park with the brachiosaur walking in the background. So it certainly has triggered the public imagination of cool cutting edge biology. So very, very cool.
Super fun.
Well, Kristy, this is before I dive in with Kahoot, can you tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here, and then we'll play our game together?
That sounds great. I'll stop sharing my screen in a second. I just want to show you, this is what it looks like when a ferret comes out at night for the first time. So like I said, they're active at night. And what they do is that this one's coming out of a prairie dog burrow. It comes out of the burrow and it scans like a telescope to see, are there predators like coyotes or badgers or owls around that are going to eat me? If not, well, I'm just going to hang out here. I'm going to see what's happening. Sometimes they do a little ferret dance where they hop around and they mark their burrow for their territory. But eventually this little guy, who's really awesome eye shine, you can see here very clearly, this one's going to jump around and look into other prairie dog burrows. So prairie dogs sleep all curled up together in a burrow. They're prairie dogs are like family groups. They all cluster together in one big sleepover. And ferrets go down into the burrows and pull one of them out to eat, to feed to themselves and their kits. So eventually this one's going to be jumping around the prairie, going to these different prairie dog holes, may or may not be successful in securing a prairie dog for the night, but they're super fun to watch. I don't think we have any dancing on this one, but I just wanted to show you how kind of long and tubular they are. They have evolved with prairie dogs for many years, and just a really all-around super cool species.
Oh, very, very cool. Thank you so much for that, and all the footage and all the pictures and everything. You have such a cool job, and your passion is palpable. So it's so fun having you on every time. We're going to dive in with our questions. So Kristy, as we bring up the Kahoot here, it's the faster you answer, the more points you get for our classes. And so what they win is our everlasting respect. And if you want to help us out, with any hints for any of these when there's like a few seconds to go and the 20 seconds they've got, you are more than welcome to chime in, and we will get underway with that. And then we're going to head to Mr. Hancock's class for our first question after that. YouTubers, you can start sharing anytime, any queries you might have. But let's dive in. True or false? Black-footed ferrets are the most endangered mammal in North America. We might have talked about this near the beginning. Who is paying attention? What do we think? What are we talking about today in general? That's your spoiler du jour. Would we bring on the second most endangered mammal in North America? I mean, we would, but I don't know. Let's see where we got. 3 more seconds. So yes, almost everybody got this right. It's a remarkably small population, which is why the work that you do is so integral. And it's been so nice to see the hope coming from all the really tangible things that you and your team and other conservation groups have been doing over the last few decades. So prairie egret's in our lead. Prairie is a fitting name for our person in the lead.
Yes, it is.
I always love when the name of the animal matches the name of the winner. That's just a complete fluke, and it happened to me like 3 times. All right. The ferret's favorite food are hot dogs, prairie dogs, insects, or squirrels. Hot dogs are one of my favorite foods, but perhaps not our ferret friends. Let's see. We just talked about this in the video as well. Kristy, they're paying attention. They all got
good job.
It's one of the most iconic predator-prey relationships in nature, I would say. That, like, when I hear one of them, I instantly think the other. So Dandy Lama takes our lead barely as we go into question 3. About how many ferrets are needed to restore the population? Do we need 30, 300, 3,000, or 30,000? I just gave you all the threes to throw you off. What do we think? I mean, the more the merrier. Like, as always with all creatures, if we had more, great. But we talked about this in the middle of the talk. What do we think, everybody? So yes, our 3,000 is what we're aiming for. That's what we're going for. We're getting there slowly but surely. And the more we keep having babies from clone ones, the better we'll be on the path to get there.
Yeah, so 3,000 in the wild.
3,000 in the wild. 15 of you got that. Dandy Lama has our lead, barely over Mountain Falcon, going into our final question. This is a multi-select, so there's going to be more than one answer is correct. What are some examples of cool tech used for ferret conservation? Drone photography, thermal imagery, biotech and cloning, or quantum lasers? Which it's fun just throwing together fun things. Let's see what we got. Get those answers in. It's more than one. We talked about a few of these, maybe several. Who was listening? One more second. Nice. So yes, the first 3 are nicely done. Quantum lasers I just invented. It's fun throwing science terms together, but pay attention to that in science. And sometimes just because it sounds complicated doesn't mean it's real. Quick unicorns in third. Second is honest hair, which is hard to say for some reason. And first for all the marbles is Dandy Lama. Well, thank you folks for playing along with that. That was awesome. And now we're going to dive in with our questions. So Mr. Hancock joining us in Georgetown. If you want to kick us off with a query on behalf of your class, you are good to go.
Absolutely. We're feeling pretty dandy in here, Jesse. Dandy Llamas here. One of the students, actually quite a few of them, were wondering, Kristy, why did you decide to do this work, and what age were you when you decided that?
Wow. Well, it's not just a black and white answer, because my path to black-footed ferrets took probably about 10 years. When I was in college, I wanted to be a wolf biologist, and so I studied wolves and grizzly bears and lynx and California condors and bison. And then I got to visit the prairie of South Dakota and was lucky enough to meet a gentleman who offered me a job. So it was the year 2000. So I was in my 20s when I first got this job for the World Wildlife Fund. And well, actually I'd worked with ferrets before I got to the World Wildlife Fund. So it was a long twisted road, but the 2 things that helped me get there in my 20s was I did a lot of volunteering. I got a lot of hands-on experience with a lot of different animals and a lot of different ecosystems. And people knew that I worked hard. So the most important thing is A, follow your bliss, follow your passion. B, make a lot of connections, offer to help out, show up on time and work hard. And sometimes the gift of really cool jobs just falls in your lap and you can become a ferret biologist too.
Amazing piece of advice. I love that you mentioned volunteering, because this is something that we hear not just from a lot of biologists and conservationists, but scientists of all stripes. Like, if you love something and you're a high school student or university student, go and explore those opportunities. See if you can be involved as an intern or a helper or anything involved in what you want to do. And it's quite amazing how often those things turn into lifelong career paths. So I love that advice. Thank you so much, Kristy.
Yeah.
All right. We're going to go to George White Middle School, joining us in Hillsdale, New Jersey. Now, Ms. Zhao's class wants to know, how long can ferrets get? We talked about Slinky, which to me is like this. Is that like a tried and true unit of measure, or what's the deal?
Yeah, it's like from your fingertips to your elbow, and that includes the ferret's body and a 5 to 6 inch tail. So they're like 19 to 21 inches long with a 5 to 6 inch tail.
Okay. Well, that was an easy one. So we're going to take another question that I love when we get in conservation programs. Same class wants to know if they can be kept as pets. We're going to extend this to a lot of info in just a minute. But what about a pet black-footed ferret? Kristy, sounds great. What do you think?
No pet black-footed ferrets, please and thanks. They're an endangered species and they need to be in the wild or in captivity. However, some of the ferrets that are pets are a different species. I mentioned earlier that they're either European polecats or Siberian polecats. They look a lot like black-footed ferrets, but they lack the really great black mask. So no black-footed ferrets as pets. However, domesticated Siberian or European polecats are pets, and they are really friendly and somewhat stinky.
I'm really glad when we get this question, because it's not just true for endangered species, but generally we bring on a lot of conservation organizations, people and whatnot. And pretty much universally, they'll highlight, if you want a pet, have a dog or cat. There are a few things outside of that are available to you, but most wild animals should be in the wild. In fact, all wild animals should be in the wild. And in fact, something that all kids can do that really does go a long way to helping some animals in the wild is don't share pictures if someone would like a pangolin on their shoulder or a monkey someone's taken out of the wild, because what you do is perpetuate people wanting to do that and thinking of it as something that can make money. And then they have to take those animals out of the wild, breed them, not usually in the best conditions. So keep wild animals in the wild, support them there, see what groups like the World Wildlife Fund are doing to help protect them, and that goes a really long way to protecting species. So thank you for that answer. And just because it's cute doesn't mean we should have it in our homes. Good message.
They're ferocious. They'd bite your face off.
That'll be the tagline the next time we have you on. They're ferocious. They'll bite your face off. Don't do it, kids. All right, we've got one more online. Mr. S's class 2 live on StreamYard. If you guys want to share in the chat or flick on your mic, I'll come to you. Mr. Hancock, we're coming back in a second. We've got a question about your job again. Do you have a favorite part of your job? Something that really gets you up in the morning? Is it being out in the field in the middle of the night with a thermal camera? What's the deal?
Oh man, yeah, field work hands down is the best thing. So yeah, it's a little bit hard. I'm a morning person, so ferret work, you start at like 10 p.m. and you go out to look for them and you stay up till sunrise. But when you see that first ferret and you trap that first ferret and you get to watch ferrets being ferrets in the wild, sometimes you hear coyotes, sometimes you see badgers or bison, sometimes you see the northern lights. And one of my favorite parts is when you trap a ferret and it chatters at you. It does this. It's pretty fun. So yeah, it's a very rewarding thing. And a second favorite part, equally as fun actually, is working with some of the younger biologists that I'm training to learn how to manage ferrets and protect ferrets and plague. It's incredibly, incredibly rewarding to share that with other people.
How nice an answer is that? And the student element is something that we don't hear very often, so thank you very much for that. The fieldwork element everybody loves, but one time I'd love to have an animal that has like a 9 to 5 schedule. Like they get up and people want to get up, and then they go to bed, and there's no need to fall. Never is the case. There's not a creature on earth that fits what we want to do, I think, ideally. So,
yeah.
Here you go. Kids, if you want to be a biologist, get ready to stay up into the middle of the night or early morning or all in between. Mr. Hancock's class, we're heading back to you guys live. Come on back in and take us away. Hey.
Yeah, one of our students was wondering, has there been any negative effects of bringing these ferrets back from the brink? And if not, could this procedure then be duplicated for other species to bring them back from the brink?
Nice.
That is a great question. I can't see, professionally, I don't see any negative impacts of bringing a native species back. Their decline was human caused. And so we have an obligation to bring them back. I think there's a lot of hardship sometimes with their prairie dog prey right here. You can see on my screen. Some landowners do not like living with prairie dogs, and that's a little bit hard. To put it in perspective, 500,000 acres to 1 million acres of prairie dog habitat is all we need to recover black-footed ferrets. There used to be 300 million acres of prairie dogs. So this is less than 1% of what once was. So yes, this model for black-footed ferret recovery is incredibly foundational and is being used in other places. You've heard about wolf recovery, you've heard about grizzly bear recovery, pangolin recovery. Each species has its own needs and niches. However, some of the principles are the same and definitely, absolutely can be replicated.
Fantastic question, guys. And again, in the World Wildlife Fund series that we've got on the go, you're going to hear more about that on the 18th. So really soon we're doing another program with another incredible WWF scientist. So tune in. And in general, conservation is the biggest part of what we do. So if you're keen on these stories, they're on our YouTube channel. We've done literally over 1,000 conservation programs on any species you can probably imagine. So I'm so glad that we get to share these stories and bring them to a wider audience and get people conserving incredible creatures and plants. Thanks, guys. All right. Do they eat a lot? Mr. Estes class wants to know, are they voracious monsters? What's the deal? Do they need to eat one prairie dog a night? What's going on, Kristy?
It's usually one prairie dog every 3 to 4 days, a mom raising babies. A female ferret will have 1 to 6 kits, usually average of 3. So when she's in the early days of raising her kits, she needs to hunt every night, and they need to eat at least every 3rd night. So one estimate was that one ferret mom and her kits will eat 273 ferrets in a year, plus or minus.
That's wild. See, from the prairie dog perspective, the return of the ferret is like terrifying. It's like, oh my goodness, they're coming to me. Important.
Yeah.
We got a neat question online. I don't think I've ever had this in one of my broadcasts. How do they keep themselves clean? Is there anything? Have you watched them do this? What's the deal?
Yeah, you don't see it happening above ground very often, but most burrow-dwelling mammals do what's called preening. And, they are taking the fleas off. They're getting the extra dirt off from scratching or, licking themselves like a dog or cat will. Or, if it's a mom, she will groom her babies as well.
It's I'm glad that we're not in a position where we need to eat the parasites off us very often, so don't do that at home. But it's pretty universal in the animal kingdom. Mr. S's class is a neat one. How do you keep track of which hole they're in? So you go back night by night or over a course of a week. Are they in the same hole? Do they switch? Anything that you can share with us?
Yeah, so every year initially, it's kind of like this big game of where are the ferrets this year? So ferrets are territorial. A mom and her babies will maintain kind of the same area, kind of like we live in a house and we maintain our yards, right? And our neighbors don't necessarily come and hang out in our yards unless invited. And so ferrets kind of maintain their home territory is what we call them, their home range. And in order to find them, we do what you saw on the screen, which was to put the spotlights on, and we drive systematically through prairie dog colonies looking for them. And once you start finding one, you usually find others, especially if it's a mom and her babies. And so once you see them, once you get either a drone sighting with a thermal camera or the spotlight looking, then you have to focus on where that ferret is. Hopefully you have somebody else in your truck, because usually you're driving, you're holding the spotlight, you're holding the steering wheel, and you're trying to keep track of where that little ferret is, and you're driving straight towards it. And usually if you have somebody with you, they can help keep eyes on it. So you literally drive to the prairie dog burrow that they're in. They're usually good about staying kind of where you saw them, unless you see them from pretty far away, which is about 500 meters or so. And then, you jump out of the truck as fast as you can and you put a trap over the top of the burrow.
I like that you make this sound very high stakes and harrowing. It sounds fascinating.
It is. We gotta go get it. Sometimes they jump around between burrows. Like if they're hunting, you'll see one in one burrow and it doesn't want to stay there. It wants to keep hunting because it's maybe away from its home burrow. And so it'll jump around and jump around and jump around, and you have to you have to track it until it goes down in one, and you have to be really fast and get out and put a track in. And hope for the best.
If you ever need a helper to like leap out the back of the truck, I'm your guy. I'll come down.
Yeah,
Cool.
We need energy and speed in those moments.
I've been running up hills. Kristy, time flies when you're having fun. We've got time for just 2 more questions together. So I'm going to head to Mr. Hancock for one, and then I'll wrap up with a final one. I want to stress again, for any student that missed it, blackfootedferret.org, worldwildlife.org, lots more to explore and discover there. And if you want to check out more of our series with the WWF, you can hear this program, like all our others, on our YouTube channel. So you can check out Kristy's program in 2 weeks or 2 years or anything else. Lots of opportunity to keep the learning going. Mr. Hancock, come on back in with one more live with us and take us away.
Yeah, you got it. So you were talking about helping species that have been affected by humans. One of our students was wondering, should we bring back extinct animals that have been long gone, and could that be possible?
Ooh. That is a very, very complex question. Thank you so much for asking it. I think it's one of individual choice, but people like the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, who manage endangered wildlife, often are the ones making those decisions. So you hear about woolly mammoths, you hear about the horses, Przlowski horses, right? There's a bunch of different species out there. I think in places where the habitat exists and there's room for coexistence with humans, there could be a role. You know, in the case of black-footed ferrets, they weren't extinct, right? We thought they were. So because they were still here, it made it an easy choice to be able to help recover them. And we should be preventing the extinction of animals. We are seeing in our lifetime extinction rates that are unprecedented. And it's definitely, prevention is an ounce of medicine, right? Like washing your hands keeps germs at bay. Protecting ferrets and prairie dogs keeps them from dying and having to go backwards. Whether we restore woolly mammoths or not, who knows?
Yeah. I really like when we get this question because de-extinction is so flashy. It's on all the newspapers, all the magazines. It's so exciting. It captures the imagination. But it's worth noting, A, we don't know technically if we can do it at all. Even if we can, it's about it's 100 times to 1,000 times the money and effort to do that than it is to protect the species that we currently have. So it's way better to protect species, no matter what their population is, than to think of a magic bullet future where we can bring something back that we've already wiped out off the planet. And I think that's a really important message whenever we talk conservation. And I love when we get questions from classes. Mm-hmm. So, Kristy, I wish we could go all day long. We've passed along all the resources. We're going to share all those with classes who registered as well. But is there any last message you want to share with our classes before we say thank you and farewell about all the cool work you do at the World Wildlife Fund?
Well, I just want to thank you again for letting me be here, for letting me share this important work, for letting me talk about ferrets. I hope that you will share this ferret story with at least one other person in your world, a friend, a family, a teacher, somebody you know. And I hope that you can find a black-footed ferret display at your local zoo or museum and go see one, because it's very life-changing to look at something that is so rare. If you're looking at that ferret, you know that there's less than 400 in the wild today, and that you got to be a part of hearing that story, and you can be a part of their future too.
I will say we have got a lot of classes in Southern Ontario, and the Toronto Zoo has black-footed ferrets. Where I saw one for the first time. They're an incredible creature. They're so lovely. And I personally am going to call my wife the moment we're done this broadcast and let her know all about ferrets. So I hope you'll do the same. Kristy, thank you so much for everything. I'm going to bring in our classes to say thank you and farewell. And if you're at home on YouTube and you want to scream and yell too with enthusiasm, please do. Annoy the principal. But Mr. Hancock, Mr. Etzcloud, thank you guys so much. Have a wonderful day, everyone. And we are done.